You were programmed to kneel at the altar. Not by choice, but by centuries of inherited illusions disguised as love. What you call romance is often a ritual. What you celebrate as commitment may be a cage. What you feel as desire might just be your trauma, whispering in a sweeter voice. This isn't cynicism, it's the raw truth buried beneath layers of fairy tales, religions, and family expectations. If you've ever wondered why so many marriages end in despair, why the happily ever after always comes with silent misery, this might explain it. What if love didn't fail you? What if the idea of love you were taught was the real betrayal? The unconscious trap, why your choice isn't your own. We're raised to believe marriage is the climax of love, the logical end to intimacy and companionship. Yet what if that belief wasn't born from freedom but forged in conditioning? From the very first stories we're fed, princes rescuing damsels, soulmates completing each other, we're given a script. But here's what most never question: who wrote it? And more importantly, what were they trying to control? Freud's idea of the compulsion to repeat explains much of this. We unconsciously seek out patterns, not peace. We chase what's familiar, even if it's destructive. You didn't choose your type. You didn't consciously select your wounds. You simply followed the unseen magnetic pull of unresolved emotion, mistaking it for fate. Take the 2017 Journal of Family Psychology study. Men with divorced parents had a 43% higher chance of divorcing. Not because they didn't want lasting love, but because the map they inherited was written in instability. Their inner compass was calibrated to chaos. Now zoom out. Look at marriage not as a singular choice, but a social ritual imposed on billions. Is it truly free will when billions repeat the same steps, the same vows, under the same pressures? Or is it collective hypnosis? The projection trap, when love becomes a hallucination. There's a moment in every doomed relationship where the illusion cracks. You look across the room at your partner and think, who is this person? But the better question might be, who did I project onto them in the first place? Freud's concept of transference unmasks this. We don't fall in love with a person, we fall in love with what they represent. A father's approval. A mother's absence. An unhealed wound begging to be soothed. When you say, I can't live without them, what you often mean is, I can't live without the dream I projected onto them. Studies back this. In 2018, research published in the Journal of Research and Personality showed a stark correlation. People with emotionally absent fathers were significantly more likely to pursue unreliable, distant partners. They weren't seeking love. They were seeking redemption, for something they didn't cause but still felt responsible for. Freud also described screen memories, fabricated recollections that protect us from pain. In love, this becomes idealization. You remember the first kiss, the butterflies, the early promises. But forget the gut instincts, the red flags, the subtle disrespects. Why? Because the truth is too painful. Because the illusion felt better than abandonment. But illusions die. And when they do, so does the relationship that was built on them. The death drive, a hidden force of self-sabotage. Why do we stay in toxic love? Why do some men keep chasing women who break them down emotionally, mentally, even financially? The answer lies in Freud's most haunting insight, thanatos, the death drive. A silent, internal gravity pulling us back into familiar suffering. This isn't metaphor. This is hard science. A 2021 neuroscience study found that individuals in toxic relationships showed brain patterns eerily similar to heroin addicts in withdrawal. The brain needs the drama. The chaos is home. The pain validates a deeply embedded belief, I am not worthy of peace. And so, a man marries a woman who reminds him of every rejection he ever endured. He convinces himself it's love. But it's not. It's self-punishment. It's his unconscious mind saying, this is what I deserve. This is how I feel alive. This is why marriage becomes the arena where the death drive flourishes. Because society won't question it. Because the wedding is celebrated, the misery is normalized, and the slow emotional decay is kept behind closed doors. Marriage, a civilization's most effective control mechanism. Freud argued that civilization itself is built on repression. Marriage, in this light, becomes a tool, not for love, but for control. Consider this: the male sexual instinct, historically, is adventurous, polyamorous, untamed. To make society safe, that wild energy had to be suppressed. Marriage, with its rings, ceremonies, and contracts, became the leash. In Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud explained how instincts are not destroyed by repression, they are twisted, transformed, hidden beneath layers of ritual and expectation. The wedding ring becomes both symbol and shackle. The honeymoon phase is the drug, the bait. The crash that follows? Expected. Planned. A return to the unconscious status quo. History is full of myths of marriage by capture, men stealing women from rival tribes. But those stories were never about romance. They were symbolic representations of male dominance, later scrubbed clean by religion and law into courtship. Now, instead of physical capture, men offer themselves willingly, financially, emotionally, legally, into a system that historically never favored them. This isn't a war on love, it's a war for clarity. Let's be clear, this is not a call to bitterness. It's a call to wake up. The Greeks had a richer understanding of love. Eros for lust and passion. Philia for deep friendship. Agape for divine, unconditional love. Not one of these meant merging bank accounts, signing legal documents, or sacrificing selfhood for social approval. You don't need to abandon love. You need to liberate it. You need to strip love of its unconscious scripts, its projection traps, its death drive rituals. You need to choose love, not out of fear, or familiarity, or pressure, but out of presence. Out of truth. Out of self-respect. Final reflection: wake up or be used. If you've ever sat at a wedding and felt a strange discomfort in your gut, now you know why. Your unconscious mind saw what your conscious mind ignored. The suit, the ring, the speeches, they're all part of the performance. But the cost of that performance can be your soul. Marriage isn't always a trap. But it is a trap for the unconscious. And most people are unconscious. To love well, you must awaken. To marry wisely, you must unlearn. And to be free, you must ask the question most never dare to ask. Is this truly my desire, or just my programming? Love reclaimed, escaping the psychological cage of modern marriage. We've been sold a fantasy. From childhood, we were fed the story that love culminates in marriage, that this legal and social contract is the highest expression of commitment, the final chapter in the book of desire. But behind the romance lies something more insidious, a system engineered not for emotional freedom, but for psychological containment. A system that often rewards conformity over connection, duty over desire, and illusion over truth. Marriage, in its modern form, is less about love and more about control. Control over male sexuality, over financial resources, over lineage, property, and social order. And while some individuals do find fulfillment in their marriages, that does not negate the deeper truth: many do not choose marriage freely. They are led into it by invisible forces, cultural scripts, childhood traumas, unconscious compulsions. Believing they are making a conscious choice, when in reality, they are acting out a role written long before they were born. Sigmund Freud warned us that we are not masters in our own house. The unconscious mind, home to our deepest fears, repressed desires, and earliest imprints, pulls the strings. And nowhere is this more evident than in romantic relationships. We project onto others, we chase our childhood wounds in adult bodies, we reenact the drama of our past, calling it love. But in truth, we are not loving, we are searching. We are hoping to rewrite what went wrong, to find validation for the parts of ourselves we secretly believe are unlovable. This is why so many men end up in marriages that feel more like obligations than unions. They were taught that their value lies in being providers. That real masculinity means sacrifice, suppression, and silent suffering. That once they say, "I do," they must become something less wild, less free, less themselves. And so, they shrink. Their needs vanish beneath the needs of the family. Their soul, the part that longs for freedom, for mystery, for depth, goes quiet. But the soul doesn't disappear. It simply retreats, waiting for a moment of awakening. And that moment often comes too late, after the divorce papers, after the financial devastation, after the emotional betrayal. The man looks back and wonders, was any of it real? Was she ever really mine? Was I ever really me? This is the tragedy of the unconscious marriage. Two people, both wounded, both conditioned, entering a contract not based on truth, but on projection, performance, and pressure. The marriage becomes a theater of roles, husband, wife, provider, nurturer, none of which allow for the full complexity of being human. And as reality sets in, the illusions fall apart. Love dies not because it was weak, but because it was never truly there. What died was a fantasy. Freud's concept of the death drive, thanatos, explains why many men stay in these lifeless marriages or repeat the same patterns with different women. The pull toward destruction is powerful, especially when destruction feels familiar. The man unconsciously sabotages his own peace, his own joy, because somewhere deep inside, pain feels like home. The suffering validates his internal belief, this is what I deserve. But what if that belief is a lie? What if marriage isn't broken? What if we are broken, and marriage simply magnifies the cracks? What if the goal isn't to destroy the institution of marriage, but to redefine it, not as a duty, a contract, or a role, but as a conscious, sovereign union between two whole individuals who don't need each other, but choose each other? To do this, we must first confront the ghosts within us. The unresolved childhood stories. The societal scripts. The inherited fears. We must ask ourselves uncomfortable questions. Am I choosing this partner, or am I reenacting my mother's distance or my father's disapproval? Am I getting married out of love, or out of fear, fear of loneliness, fear of judgment, fear of aging alone? Am I truly free, or am I just obedient? Freedom begins the moment we become brutally honest with ourselves. This is not a declaration of war against love. In fact, it is the opposite. It is a radical reclaiming of love, love that is not bound by legality, not diluted by fantasy, not performed for others, but lived from the core of one's being. A love that does not need a wedding to be real, or a ring to be valid. A love that is chosen, not compelled. In ancient times, love was sacred because it was wild. The Greeks honored Eros, the god of passion, not as something to be tamed, but as a divine force. Philia celebrated friendship, the quiet bond between equals. Agape was unconditional love, often spiritual in nature, not transactional. None of these forms of love required the machinery of modern marriage to thrive. Today, we confuse ownership with intimacy. Security with connection. Possession with presence. We idolize the wedding day and ignore the emotional void that often follows. We believe that legalizing love will make it permanent, not realizing that permanence without depth becomes prison. But you have a choice. You can awaken. You can step out of the unconscious trap. You can love without losing yourself. You can commit without being caged. You can seek connection without sacrificing your sovereignty. This requires inner work. Self-awareness. A willingness to be alone rather than entangled in illusions. It demands that you break the cycle, that you stop chasing women who echo your wounds, and start choosing women who meet your soul. That you stop viewing marriage as the pinnacle of success, and start measuring love by its truth, not its traditions. Because true love is not about completing each other. It's about seeing each other, clearly and without masks, and still choosing to walk side by side. So, If you've made it this far, the real question is no longer, should I marry? The real question is, am I awake enough to love, and strong enough to do it on my own terms? If the answer is yes, then perhaps for the first time in your life, you are free. Not free from love, but free to love. Not free from commitment, but free from unconscious compromise. Not free from women, but free from the ghost of the boy who was never allowed to question the script. Now you are no longer a boy. You are a man. And a man doesn't fall into marriage. He walks into it, with clarity, with power, and with eyes wide open.